Welcome everybody to another episode of the In the Paint Show, episode 131. This is Ronnie Flores with my co-hosts Ani Amana and Chelsea Hopkins. How you guys doing? We're here to talk about an important topic, player rankings. Everybody likes to talk about player rankings, our listeners and our viewers. How you guys doing today?
Good morning, Ronnie. I am well. It is Monday. Let's get into it.
Ani, what's going on, bud?
Oh, man, just, another busy weekend. My Mavs, they're 0-3, but, Mavs in 7. So it's all good.
Yeah, Ani.
Mavs in 7.
I wasn't going to talk about that, but
Mavs in 7. No, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about Mavs in 7.
Okay.
We got to talk about it for a minute. I mean, Ani, they're down 3-0. So what's the main problem? Is it they need another star, or is it doesn't matter? They're too slow. They're too slow-footed. They can't rebound. They can't get to the ball quick enough. They can't cover quick enough. What's their main problem?
I mean, the reality is Golden State has the series, right? Messing around at this point. But, getting killed on the glass, I mean, definitely need interior presence. Another second all-star type player in the wing at the guard spot doesn't matter. But really just the interior presence. Guys aren't making shots like that last game. I mean, Reggie Bullock went like 0 for 7 from 3, 0 for 10 from the field. Dorian Finney-Smith didn't make shots. I just think what you're seeing is a team and a group of players that haven't been to the Western Conference Finals and a little overwhelmed by just, what it takes. I think after that Sun series, I thought they kind of relaxed. They kind of got relaxed. I'm like, we can do this again, right? Yeah. And it's hard to win an NBA championship. You talk about winning 16 games. And you're going to play a lot. Like you're going to be in 6-7 game series. All right, you get done with one, and 2 days later, you're going to play another series, right? With the whole, with the practice, the whole different personnel and everything. And the Mavs right now, they just haven't adjusted. And with the Warriors, you've seen a team that's been there before, right? And that got the young guys too, to understand what it takes. But Dallas they're just not ready. I mean, they're over. I think they're talented enough to compete. Obviously, this shouldn't be a sweep, but it may end up being a sweep. But at the end of the day, there's just lack of experience, and they don't. I mean, Dwight Powell's your starting center, and he's getting 8 minutes a game. He can only play 8 minutes a game. Maxi Kleber's not making any shots. You have an interior presence. I think it makes a difference, but I also do think Dallas needs a budding star with Luka.
Chelsea, or what do you think in terms of you were at the game, you went to a couple games. What did you see up close, and what do you see in person that may give you a little bit more perspective?
Yeah, I was in game 1 and 2 in San Francisco. And, honestly, just watching, like, the Mavs just don't have enough. They have Luka, who's absolutely incredible, but just not enough firepower, not enough on offense at all. Luka's out there creating like crazy, and people aren't making shots. And, in his defense, like, I feel like he tries to get people involved. But then when he says, okay, Reggie, I passed it to you 7 times and you haven't scored, now I'm going to shoot more. So I feel like he's on the ball a little bit too much, just because of the maybe not lack of trust, but just when your teammates aren't doing anything, now it's like, okay, now I have to feel like I have to do more. And, nobody's going to be able to win, on their own. And Golden State, they're just such a well-oiled machine. The margin of error versus them is so small. Like I went to game 2, the Mavs are up 20 points. They ate that lead up in, 3 minutes. You look up by the next media timeout, and now Golden State's up 2 points. So, it's lack of experience. It's lack of firepower. I just think Golden State is the clear better team. They have a lot of issues that you can break down, defensively, especially just rebounding and, shot making, because you have to make shots versus Golden State. Most times they're getting 3s. A lot of teams are getting 2s. Mavs are a 3-point shooting team, but, you're not going to win any games with Luka having 40 and then people that are playing, 30 minutes barely getting 10 points. So, or 0 points in Reggie Bullock's case, where he went 0 for everything. So, they just don't have enough. I think it's not really time for Luka to be in the finals yet, but I do think that they're going to get there. They need some more pieces for sure. Definitely need a stronger post presence. And, they're a couple pieces away from, being a really good team. But I think that, this was a good season for them. They made it farther than what people thought. And sometimes that's okay. Like they went as far as they could possibly go, but the road is definitely ending here, and I would say in a sweep. Not what did they play tomorrow or the next day?
Yeah, they
tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's over. Sorry, Ani, and you owe me $1.
Yeah, it's over. It's over. It's all good. We're coming back.
Okay.
Yeah, based on that, I thought you guys would rally each other a little bit. Chelsea, what's going on with the Phoenix Mercury? I mean, the two stars are getting at each other. That kind of look like you and Ani on social media going back. What's going on there? Is that just that's just normal banner in games? Sometimes that happen, or is it like you said? Hey, as you said in our WNBA preview, like sometimes the older stars got to move aside, like or is it more than that, or is it just just in the heat of the moment they maybe not playing well?
Well, ironically, I was at that game too. I was literally 5 rows behind the bench. So everybody saw the commotion, but nobody could hear exactly what was being said. Diana and Skylar both had slow starts, turnovers, sluggish, not really making shots. So definitely I saw some frustration, just maybe the way that they were individually playing. Then they go to the timeout. Skylar sitting there looking very agitated until she eventually gets up and says something in this direction, like looking down towards the bench, which is where all the players were sitting. So we didn't know at first that she was talking to Diana until Diana like got up and it became like a thing. But I mean, I would say that that's pretty normal. I mean, you see in sports, it gets heated. Like everybody's out there just trying to win and do the best they can. I don't really think that it's, anything that's not happened, before somewhere else. Like, you see that kind of thing all the time. But I do think that, sometimes, old heads or just people, feel like they have always a right to say something or, address something when they're not out there doing their part either. Because I can say that both of them weren't playing great. So I don't know if Diana's saying, hey, Skylar, play better or whatever. Like both of them kind of had slow starts and you just never know. And Diana, she's known to be a little spicy. So when she talks to people, especially the refs, and so it wouldn't surprise me if she said something that maybe Skylar took exception to. But we don't really know what happened unless you're in the locker room and you're there with their team. But I think it's a non-issue. And even though it was entertaining for us, I hate that those are the headlines that the WNBA gets. Not like, the Aces were incredible and they just really were just beating the crap out of Phoenix. That should be the storyline. Phoenix sucks. They beat them 3 times in a row in, a week span. But instead, we're just talking about, the Skylar Diana thing. But I do think, obviously, there's something there because Skylar hasn't played the last 2 games. Wow. So they reported non-COVID illness. And maybe she's sick. But I think she's sick of Diana. And I wouldn't be surprised if she just needed a little break. So we'll see when she comes back. But let's better WNBA headlines though. Like let's talk about some teams being good as opposed to just drama and Brittany we need to talk about. But I'm just saying, like I want to see some more positive stuff.
Or just more performance based. You know, just not like nothing was really talked about like the performances of that game, just more about that situation. And you see I agree with her. Like you see a lot of that like when it comes to WNBA coverage, it's more about the fight more than how did they play? You know what I mean? How's Phoenix Mercury been playing? Probably like what do you think? I don't know. Just I wish there was more performance based stuff you see in WNBA. Every time I see a WNBA headline, it's always something where it's like, I just want to see more. I was more interested in seeing like how they performed the next game, right? Or
lost again.
You know what I mean? Like, but we don't talk about that. Mm-hmm. And like Skylar Diggins been out for the past 2 games. Like why? Like I don't know. We could
speculate.
Like it just needs to be more to me performance based and just
absolutely
TMZ. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of and that goes to which we're talking about. As we keep up with the, like the daily trends and topics. And, there's a lot of chatter about what's going on off the court with the NBA too, like the Dallas bench. That's not going to matter no more. Like you said, they're probably not going to, no team's ever come back 3-0. What do you guys think about the other series? Obviously, Miami bounced back. We'll go over that real quick. It looks like Tyler Hero's not going to play in game 4. But again, is Jimmy Butler gonna play? And then when you talk about Jimmy Butler, I think he is one of the guys that you could really highlight along with Steph among NBA stars. It's like, and we're talking about player rankings today, is that they were really like even a non-factor in that. Jimmy Butler went to junior college. I don't think he had any offers. And look at now, he's putting up 40 points in conference finals games. He's been to the NBA finals leading this team. And he really doesn't have a superstar. Like we saw about Luka, he doesn't really have a superstar, but they have good chemistry. They have better defense. They're a little bit, when a guy goes out, another guy steps up, which that hasn't happened with Dallas. So what do you guys think about that series?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, I think just Jimmy Butler and that Miami Heat group, they're just really well put together with Bam Adebayo, Vincent, Tyler Hero coming off the bench, Max Frosh. You have shooting, you have deep, you have guys that can be switchable on the defensive end. You have an interior presence, and Jimmy just. One thing I think Jimmy does a real good job of is just leading, and he's always been like that. You know, he went to the same junior college I did, Tyler Junior College, and it was, you know, so it was he was the same way at TJC. In college, you know, Buzz Williams was his coach who's now at A&M. He would talk about the same thing. Every time recruits would come into A&M, he would talk about how Jimmy was when they in college. And so it's one of those things that Jimmy just knows how to lead, right? And he knows how to get the most out of those guys. Miami being up 2-1, that surprised the hell out of me. Like
they came back.
You know, and they've been dealing with injuries. Has Kyle Lowry even really played?
He played last game.
Yeah, he played last game.
Last game he was good. You know, Jimmy missed the second half, so last game he was out there.
So you know they've been dealing with injuries. They're going to deal with injuries kind of going forward. But I think it really look at how Jimmy's been leading. I mean, it's just been impressive. You know, people thought, oh, in the bubble, he got him to the finals. He can't do that again, right? And now they're in a situation where they're 2 games away from winning another championship. I mean, from getting to the finals again. He just knows how to get the most out of his guys. But that's been something that's been talked about Jimmy from when he was like 19 years old. You know, he was a late bloomer in high school, you know, and that's why he had to go to college.
Yeah, it's very interesting when we talk about Steph. And like they said, those 2 guys kind of lead that pack. Steph's dad obviously was a top 100 player, and he went to Virginia Tech, and he's a great shooter and a pretty good NBA player, good spot up shooter. We didn't really call it a spot up shooter when he was with Charlotte that much. He was just a good player. And it's like VTech didn't offer him a scholarship. Like, you know, he went to the NBA Players Association camp, obviously, because his father played in the NBA. He probably wouldn't have been there otherwise. And like nobody still saw or had enough guy to say, well, maybe he's going to be down the line. He's going to develop into something. Obviously, nobody knew he was going to develop into the best shooter ever and one of the best players ever. But that just goes to show you, because most Seth Greenberg, and I got to see a lot of his recruits and what kind of recruits he liked, and you know, what kind of player he liked, because he was at Long Beach State before he was at VTech, and Long Beach State is down the street from my house. And they had good players. They had NBA players, Lucius Harris, a few other guys, Byron Russell, who obviously went on to help the Utah Jazz to a couple finals. So he had good players. So it's like, if you're not going to offer that guy whose dad played at VTech, like, there's just no telling what's going to happen in this. And that's what our topic is today. We want to talk to some guys who's been around player rankings for a long time. We're going to talk to Clark Francis of the Hoop Scoop, who started his player rankings over 30 years ago, in 1983, or 35 years ago, and why he did it and how he came to that. And I know, Chelsea, you're kind of interested in that, and maybe how it relates to some of the things you went through in your playing career. And we're going to talk to Paul Biancardi a little bit more about this year's rankings. And this propped up because Richard Davenport of the Arkansas Democrat Press, he reached out to me and he wanted to know about Corliss Williamson. And Corliss Williamson obviously led the Hogs, Arkansas, to the national championship in 1994 during his sophomore year. And there was all this buzz because Nick Smith, who played at North Little Rock, was Nick Smith, who we see here, was ranked number 1 by 247 Sports. Eric Bossing, his rankings, obviously he came in Rivals number 2 and ESPN number 3. So there was a lot of buzz in Arkansas, and obviously Arkansas has a great recruiting class. People expect them to. There's as much buzz as when Nolan Richardson was there. So, you know, we got into it and we wanted to talk about it. I said, oh, yeah, Corliss Williamson, number 1. I just don't recall that because he's in the class with Othella Harrington, who was a big center, was supposed to be Georgetown's next big center, right after Dikembe Mutombo. And they actually Dikembe played with Lonzo Mourning, who was a number 1 type player. And obviously Patrick Ewing before him was a number 1 type player. So that's how all this came about. And then obviously Jason Kidd is in that class, and Jason Kidd is like a California legend. He's the first rock star athlete in terms of high school basketball that really went through California. It was like huge. You guys, he was huge in the Bay Area. He was almost as big as, obviously without the social media and the instant highlights, as Steph Curry is now. Like, he was as big as Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. Like, people knew him that well. So I was like, I don't really recall that. But then I started digging, and I remember that Corliss Williamson went to the Nike camp at the time, and obviously that was the big evaluation place where the scouts can watch the players. And Corliss Williamson was the top player in that camp. Van Coleman put him number one, and Bob Gibbons put him number one. So Bob Gibbons, All-Star Sports, put him number one. So top performer at the camp. So obviously back then, when you're the top player in that camp, it's not a stretch to say people are going to call you the top player in the nation, because most of the good players, unlike the events now, Ani, all the good players were there. And it was a big moment for you to try to shine, and everybody got to see the top players in one setting. So the question I have for you, Ani, is then I have a question for you, Chelsea, is, Ani, what do you think about the rankings this year with Nick Smith, Derek Lively, all the rankings having a different guy?
Yeah, I think
that with rivals number one, obviously going to do.
I think the 22 class has been fairly open. We talked about in previous shows, you can put multiple guys number one in Nick Smith. Keontae George at one point really made a case for being number one. Derek Lively. We saw Flipikowski, who's going to Duke, being number one at some point. I mean, Khalil Ware, how he was playing in those All-Star games. I mean, they were like, is he potentially number one? You had a lot. I mean, there was just a lot of guys compared to previous years where you had more of a clear-cut number one. Dylan Mitchell, who's really ascended, who's on 23 draft boards. You got a lot of guys, you got a decent amount of guys compared to previous years that really have a chance to be number one. I don't know if it's more so not one player has really sticked out or really just done better than the rest, but the 22 class is really strong. I mean, that's a really strong class compared to previous years. So and Nick Smith, I have him as my number one. I have him one. I have Whitehead, then Mitchell, then Lively. Those are like my top four. But it's open. You could put Khalil Ware, like I said, where I talked about a couple of those guys. Amari Bailey, who I thought had a strong second half of the year, and then in the All-Star games, started coming back to his own. I mean, we're talking about 8 guys on that list right there, and I could probably name another 2 or 3 that have an argument of being number one. So,
correct. Yeah. And obviously it changed because, as we talked about many times on the pod, Amani Bates left and Jalen Duran left, and Jalen Duran's obviously going to be in this draft. So I think we have our first guest, Clark Francis, ready to come on. Again, Clark is the founder of the Hoop Scoop. He's done rankings, and we're gonna ask him some questions of kind of what we talked about with the Corliss Williamson and buzz being around Arkansas's class led by Nick Smith. So let's pull in Clark now.
I'm in the show, Ronnie.
Clark, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Appreciate you coming on. I'm here with my co-hosts, Chelsea Hopkins and Ani Umana. How are you doing, Clark? How's everything going?
Very good. How about you?
Doing good. Can't complain at all. So, you had been in the business already for about 10 years. You'd been to Louisville games. You'd been around the program. You'd been around Kentucky. You'd been in Final Four locker rooms. You'd already done that. So what made you decide to, start the rankings about 10 years in after you'd been covering the game?
Well, really, we did rankings all the way through, and rankings are important because it's a snapshot in time in terms of what somebody thinks. So if you have credibility, if you know what you're doing, that's why they're important.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What did you think of that back then when you first got in? Like, obviously we just talked about the Nike camp, and we talked about Corliss Williamson because there's a lot of buzz right now because there's a player in Arkansas from North Little Rock who's number one, and people are saying, oh, he's the number one player in this class, and he's the first number one player in Arkansas in basically 30 years since Corliss Williamson. And obviously he played well at that Nike camp. You didn't have him number one. Van had him number one. Bob Gibbons had him number one. So when you go back to that, what do you kind of recall about that class and Corliss and that group with Jason Kidd and Othella Harrington? And, what did you think about that camp?
Well, again, it was a great camp. That was back in the heyday of when basketball was fabulous. I mean, Jason Kidd was the best player in that class, not even close. But, from Corliss, Williamson, again, it's a case of it doesn't mean you're going to be the be-all, end-all. It doesn't mean you're going to be the best player in college or or whatever. It means this is what somebody thinks at the time. And, that's, Corliss Williamson was one of the best players in that class. He was a little bit an undersized four-man at the time, but he was a terrific talent.
Yeah, he definitely was.
Clark, just kind of curious, as an evaluator, like what's the first thing that you look at when you're evaluating a player for the first time?
I tell people most great players have one of three things: size, athleticism, outside shooting, and the fourth thing that really separates players is work ethic. So, if you're 6'10", you're a freak athlete, you're the hardest working guy that anybody's ever seen, and you can shoot the lights out, you're Kevin Durant. And again, if you have a couple of those things, if you're a 5'10" guy without any quickness, so you don't have size, you don't have any speed, quickness, athleticism, but you shoot the lights out and you play hard, you won't pay for your education. You may not play Division I, but unless you're going to the NBA or playing at a higher level, you're just trying to get a free education. That's the name of the game. So then you're trying to figure out what level you can play at and where you're going to have the best education. And unlike all these guys that transfer now, stay at the same place for 4 years in terms of your college career.
Nice. So when you give a list, though, I'm sorry, real quick, Ani.
Sure.
When you give a list of those factors or whatever, are any of those, like when you're evaluating somebody, just like a deal breaker? Like you mentioned size, for example. Then I look at players like Steph Curry, little, small, skinny kid. You don't really have any projection of, think he's going to be a super talent because that's just how he's built. Or you look at like Trae Young, short, thin frame, not really muscular. Like, do you feel like there's just any one thing that would just totally deter you from, what you think a player could be? And, just a little perspective on that.
No, because every player is different. And a lot of it's just basically in the bottom line, which one do you like better? And again, Steph Curry is a great example. He was the 20th best player at the NBA Players Association camp at his position, which means he's about 100 in camp out of 110 players. And we all liked him. We all thought he was going to be a good mid-major player. Del Curry's son. Then he grows 2 inches. He goes to a place where they're going to develop him. They have vested interest in making him the star of the team. He bought in. He was a terrific talent. Again, but the fact that he grew a couple inches and had that work ethic. And again, in this day and age, maybe the most important thing of all is really the work ethic.
Yeah.
Clark, when you were doing the rankings, what was the grade that you started ranking players?
We did players when we saw players. We did junior phenom camp and things like that down to like 6th grade. Again, I remember J. Michael Reese. We rated him as the number 1 player at junior phenom camp, and people were like, "Who's the? Does that mean he's destined for stardom? Does that mean he's going to be the best player in his class? Does that mean he's going to play in the NBA?" And I'm like, no, it means he's the best 6th grader could change tomorrow, and it did.
Mm-hmm.
On those rankings, was there anybody you saw that you evaluated in the 6th grade that were highly ranked that stayed up in that top tier till their senior year?
There were a ton of guys, and again, basically it's the same principle. You're looking for size. If you were 6 foot 6th grader, suddenly you got a chance to be 7 feet by the time it's all said and done. Alonzo Trier was one of my all-time favorite guys at junior phenom camp. I asked him when he was actually in 6th grade, how many jump shots do you day? He said, make a day. He said, I don't know, but how many does he shoot? But he said, I make 500. And so when you have that kind of dedication and he had some adversity along the way, but I think one of the most important things is two things that deter players, that hurt players the most, that they never recover from, is they lose confidence and they lose speed, athleticism, because they bulk up too much. And when they do that, and Alonzo Trier fell into that category, he lost a little bit of athleticism at one point. But when you overcome that and come back, then suddenly you've really got something.
Wait, so Clark, just to piggyback off of something that you just said, talking about just like the junior phenom camp, like, do you think sometimes it's to the detriment of these kids to rank them so early? I know it's maybe good to have a baseline so people can kind of figure out where they are, but what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think with some players it is a detriment, but it's not my job to be the parent. It's the parent's job to be the parent. So
Ooh,
if
I
you
like
go
that.
to if you go to the camps and put yourself out there, then you're fair game for somebody to critique you, maybe positive, maybe negative. You always hear the thank you, and you wrote great things about my kid, but you get criticized when you don't. But why did we really? And I thought about this recently. Why did we start ranking players in early age? And again, it's nice to have seen the first Michael Jordan or the first LeBron James or whoever it is in early age. But college coaches really wanted a list of players. They wanted to know who was out there. They can't. There's all the recruiting regulations change all the time, but they wanted to start building their database earlier the better. So basically, I had 3 or 4 college coaches. This 6th, 7th grade. Hey, the more names you give us, the better. We can't send a mail. We can't contact them, but we can keep track of them.
You watch them.
So that was important. And again, from my standpoint, I got some criticism at the time, but now Nike and all these other shoe companies are, they have all the, middle school grassroots circuits. So we were ahead of the game on all that. So it was fun. I enjoyed it. And it gave us tremendous perspective. Some of the neatest stories I can ever remember were at the 14th International AAU tournament. I remember watching Jerome Ty, who played at Virginia, and he's 5 foot. I think he was in 8th grade, and shooting the lights out in the 14th International AAU tournament. I'm telling some of the people that are in my business that he was the best player I saw all day, and they're like, a 5 foot guard can't be the best player that you saw all day. And it's like they went back and watched him and didn't agree with me, but they said he's pretty darn good. And then he grew over a foot and played at Virginia and won a national championship, and great kid. But stuff like that, it's neat. You were ahead of the game, and you, again, it's not where you are at that point in 6th, 7th, 8th grade or any place along the way, but it's a case of to have the perspective, and it's not where you start, it's not where you are in the middle of the game, it's where you end up. And again, it's all relative.
Yeah, there's some good perspective there, Clark. Let's go fast forward a little bit to the older kids, and we talked about Nike camp. You go in there, you've been there since the first one, 83 on up. And then Sonny Vaccaro, who's in charge of the player selection. He's obviously a marketing expert for Nike. He splits from Nike, and Nike basically Phil Knight gets rid of him. And he goes off and he ventures to do his own camp, the ABCD camp. And so was Vaccaro split from Nike? Did it make it harder to see the good players, or did the competition between Sonny and the Nike camp ramp up the competition, and did it make it better? Did it make it better for you? What did it do there?
We were so spoiled in the late 80s. I mean, I think the 87 camp had Alonzo Mourning, Sean Kemp, Billy Owens, Chris Jackson, Malik Sealy, Christian Laettner, guys like that. It was a joke, and it was all in one place. Sonny actually, the predecessor to the Nike camp was the athlete camp, Athletes for Better Education, which was in Princeton, New Jersey in 1983. And the 3 best players were Danny Manning, Chris Washburn, and Kevin Madden. And I was at 5-star, and there's this new camp in Princeton, and coaches are going to it. And the first time they'd ever flown the players in and paid all their expenses. So I actually showed up at that camp, was there, I think, 3 days. And so I had no idea what I was getting into. And then the next year they got Ben Wilson, who Benji Wilson's who they called him later, but we all knew him as Ben Wilson back then. In 1984, they got most of the top players in the country. Tom Konchowski helped them get that done. The late Tom Konchowski, and it was a great camp, and they didn't pay their bills at the end of the summer. Sonny Vaccaro took it over, became the Nike camp, and then you had the split of Adidas when Sonny went to Adidas. So you had 2 camps for about 10 years or so, and Nike had the camp in Indianapolis. And Sonny really understood the importance of the camps and the marketing. Every time the Hoop Scoop or Bob Gibbons or somebody wrote about the camp or somebody at the camp, it was an ad for Adidas. And basically, I sat next to the president of Worldwide Swimming one time on an airplane, and for Adidas, and he'd never heard of Sonny Vaccaro. That's how small, in the grand scheme of things, the grassroots basketball was. But in our world, Sonny Vaccaro was single-handedly going head-to-head with Nike and actually getting better players in his camp. So testament to Sonny Vaccaro, and again, those were the good old days. Then he went to Reebok in the end, and he wanted to sign LeBron James to a shoe deal, and Nike. I knew somebody was on the conference call with George Raveling one time with all the grassroots people, and George Raveling said that it doesn't matter what it costs. We're going to sign LeBron James. Money's no object. So Nike already decided. Sign get yes.
Yeah, they were going to give him $1 more. Didn't matter.
Yeah.
But back to the valuation part. Did that make it harder for you to split between 3 days at each camp or 2 days and 3 days, or did it make it better because the competition was better, or were you just back to you were spoiled at Nike camp for those 6 or 7?
It made it really a lot harder because you had to go. I mean, there were days for a number of years I'd have people at all 3 camps, and I'd go to what was it, Adidas first in Atlanta because they had camp, and then I guess this is when after Sonny gone to Reebok, but you're talking. We did a Adidas camp in Atlanta for a day, then we go to Nike for a day or two. I think 2 days, and then we go to Reebok for the last day or two, or I'm sorry, Reebok and Peanut for the last couple of days, and that was, stay up all night 2 out of the, about 4 days, and we do rankings, and we'd send stuff back and forth, and we'd have people at all 3 camps, and I'd have rankings going to the airport. We'd have it printed out, and I'd give copies to college coaches because I was always getting the first flight out. And there were like 10 coaches on my flight, and I remember Bruce Pearl a couple of times was on the back-to-back was on my flight. It's like, where are the rankings, Clark? And but that was a great rule. And again, I mean, you're going to the camp, you're going from one camp, you see what you saw last night, and then you're going to the next camp, and it's like, here's what we think. And again, it may change. We may be right. We may be wrong. But here's what somebody at that camp thought. That gives you a great starting point. And one of my all-time favorite stories, Richard Hamilton was at ABCD camp. I think he was in Kobe Bryant's class. And he tore up the camp, came out of nowhere. Nobody knew about him except Alan Rubin and a few people in Philly. And we were the next day after the camp was over, we were getting ready to leave. And we saw Wayne Morgan, who was an assistant coach at Syracuse at the time. And we're like, Wayne, what do you think of Richard Hamilton? And Wayne's like, who's Richard Hamilton? And we're like, he's one of the best players in the camp. He tore up the camp. Oh, by the way, Wayne, we got a list of players from a lot of the players in the camp in terms of what schools they like. And Syracuse is on the list. You're one of the 4 schools you mentioned. You want his phone number? So stuff like that, just classic. But it's like if you're a coach at a camp, that's important because coaches have no idea what's going on at the camp. They're just, especially the big time schools, they're just babysitting 5 or 10 guys. They only know what those guys did.
Sure. Clark, give us, what is the best thing that you think that came out from the industry as a result of the rankings? What's the best thing that came out of that? And it's still going, and obviously it's huge, it's bigger. But what from when you're starting, let's say Gibbon started in 1979, actually putting a number by a name, and then going to now, what's the best thing that came out of that?
Well, and Ronnie, you've got the old list of Bill Cronar. He did a top 33 and a Super 5, and a second 33 and a third 33 and a top 500 and the top 1,000 honorable mention. I mean, there are different degrees of rank, but rankings are important because you're telling somebody what they think. And too many people in our business over the years, here's just a list of the top players. We don't want to put it on the line because we don't want to piss anybody off. And rankings actually pin you down, and it's like, here's again, it's everything in life. What do you think? Tell me what you think. And rankings really narrow it down. Give you a perspective. If you're it's a big difference if you're a top 5, 10 guy in the class versus a top 100 guy or a top 200 guy. And again, I think rankings. Look at the Associated Press and the ESPN polls and the old UPI poll that no longer exists. I don't believe. Basically, in terms of the preseason rankings for college basketball, everybody buys the preseason basketball magazines because they wanted to see where their team was ranked. Doesn't mean you're going to win the championship. Doesn't mean you're going to the Final Four. Doesn't mean you're going to win 20 games. But there's a starting point, and it might be right, might be wrong. If you have credibility and you can sell it, and people will buy it, then you're in business.
So Clark, with the rankings being the way that they are, like, do you think that things have gotten a little bit out of control? Like in terms of unrealistic expectations, you have kids, you have handlers, you have parents that are constantly chasing these, rankings, maybe instead of development now because it's such a big thing.
Sure, no question. I mean, little league parents at this point are the entitlement of our society is totally out of control. So it's not just a basketball thing; it's a societal thing.
Yeah.
So, but again, if you understand what rankings are, then you're in good shape. And I'm one of the people that rankings were huge.
Clark, which classes in your time of doing this were had the most depth, just from top to bottom?
The 1979 class was the best class of all time. Top star power, depth. Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. And you're talking the best player in that class might not have been Ralph Sampson. It might have been Clark Kellogg. But those were the two. And then, the guys that were in the top 30 in the country were unbelievable. I remember Rodney McRae was a top 30 player, and he played in the Loyal Final 14, played in the NBA many years. Isaiah Thomas, Ray McCoy, Dominic Wilkins, Antoine Carr, the list goes on and on and on. And I think the class of 1995 with Kevin Garnett, Stephon Marbury, Ron Mercer, Sharif Abdul-Rahim, Paul Pierce, Vince Carter, guys like that was a ridiculous class as well. And then also the Alonzo Mourning, Sean Kemp, the class, I think it was 88 class. They were at the 87 Nike camp.
Yeah.
Talking about Kevin Garnett, when was the first time you got this? You were able to evaluate him, like a player like that? Did you know early that he was going to be who he was?
Which player?
Kevin Garnett.
Yeah, we saw Kevin Garnett as prior to I was tipped off on him, but it's at the Nike camp as a junior, he was unbelievable. And again, Kevin Garnett really was an inside guy at that point. But he had the athleticism, the size, and the work ethic, and again, I remember the Beach Ball Classic, and we're talking, I think, the winter of 1993. We're watching Kevin Garnett go for 41 points on Malden High Schools in South Carolina as a junior in high school, and I'm going over to Tom Konchowski and other people. I asked Tom, "Who's the best high school player I've ever seen?" He said Lou Alcindor. Asked a few other people. Got to Bill Coronaro. And he said, I might be watching him, Kevin Garnett. That's how good Kevin Garnett was.
Wow.
Yeah, Clark, did you know, I just wanted to give a shout out to Bill. Like you said, his rankings, he didn't put a number necessarily by them, but he had them out there in the 70s. And he just passed away in late last year. Obviously, we talk about Dave Bones. He's one of the original guys. He passed away. And obviously, Garf, who started the 5-star camp, also passed away. So yeah, we see Kevin Garnett here in his profile. He was number one, obviously, by you and by Bob. And that was like you said, it was easy to see, and maybe the difference in separator. Did he have that intensity and work ethic that people talk about him now for? Because obviously he had the talent. When I saw him in LA, I said, this guy can't be this good, is he? But I didn't know his background, that he really wanted it and he wanted to be great. I didn't know.
Kevin Garnett had it all the way through. Kevin Garnett was amazing.
Yeah.
So, and again, from Coronaro's standpoint, he was one of the best. I mean, even when he didn't see guys in person, he did his homework. He was wired in. His rankings were really good. I mean, he was on the money.
Yeah. Shout out to Bill Cronauer.
Great guy too. I mean, just a wonderful person. It was always good to me, but his heart was in the right place, and he had a great love for the game.
Sure. So obviously we talk about the great players, and how about on the other end? Is there a ranking that you want to maybe take back, or you remember like, man, I didn't get that right, or obviously nobody's perfect, and basketball's not a perfect game. Referees make mistakes, players make mistakes, coaches make mistakes, and rankers make mistakes.
No, I don't want to take any rankings back, because at the time I thought it was right. Yeah. Again, things change, and sure. From a standpoint of you may wish you hadn't rated a guy the way you did. But you said something a minute ago that I think a good rule of thumb. If you're a great player, you can tell in warm-ups. I mean, it's not that hard. If you aren't sure, if you have to go back and watch a guy a second, a third, fourth time, the more unsure you are, the less likely he can play. So that's a good rule of thumb for people in our business and just, people in general. If you don't know, if you're not sure, then the longer you can't figure it out, the more likely the kid can't play.
Sure.
Okay, Clark, wait, last question. So I know you don't want to take any rankings back, and I totally understand that, because obviously players develop, and like you said, you rank them based off of what you felt at the time. But is there anybody that you ranked that just far, far, far exceeded any expectations? Like anybody that you could just, think of that just exceeded any expectations that you thought far exceeded expectations, I guess, that you thought they would be, what kind of player they would be?
Well, Steph Curry's the great example. Nobody thought he was going to be what he turned out to be when he was in, rising senior in high school, but again, he grew. If I had to take one ranking back, the one I've taken the most grief on over the years is probably Demetrius Walker. But in 8th grade, he was as good a player. I mean, he was fabulous. And again, classic example. He didn't grow, and he read his press clipping. Sports Illustrated said he was like the next coming of whatever, and he read that and stopped working. And Demetrius is now at San Juan Capistrano as an assistant coach, that type thing. And he's a great kid, but it's like, we've had this conversation, but it's like, it's stuff happens. And again, are we, the worst thing that can happen is players read their press clippings and start believing all that stuff and think they've made it and stop working. Demetrius Walker was the classic example.
Yeah.
Well, Clark, we appreciate your candid insight and your honesty. Appreciate you giving us some time and looking back at some of the things. And thank you for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Well, Ronnie, thanks for your friendship, and thanks to all of you for what you do for the game.
Appreciate you, Clark.
Thank you, Clark.
Have a good one.
Talk to you later, bud.
All right, bye.
Take care. Yeah, it's funny. I said, what do you want to take back? I just want to take back nothing. I think that's him being a little proud of what he's doing. And
no, but I respect that though. Like he said, the biggest thing that he said is you're ranking the player at the time. And what they become 5 years from now, 10 years from now, a 20-year NBA career, that's, you evaluated them when you evaluated them. So I think that he's like on the money, and like, it doesn't mean you're always going to be right,
Right.
And that really depends on the kid. And I really like the stuff that he said about just, it's not my job to be the parent. Hey, your kid is here. I'm ranking them. If they suck, they suck. If they don't, they don't. And they need to go home to their mom and dad and figure out the rest. And I really liked that. Wow.
Let me ask you a question, Chester, you from the player perspective. Do you like Nike Camp? To me, it's like, and you look at Hoop Dreams, the documentary, and you can kind of see that like a lot was put on that 5 or 6 days for those guys. Like they had to perform. I remember Jason Kidd did well in that camp. That was the summer of 1990. Chris Webber was probably the best player. Juwan Howard did good. But like from your perspective, would you have liked that? Like, hey, I want to go to this camp because I'm not playing travel ball that much. I'm going to kick all these girls' asses. Or would you feel like, man, if I don't play good here, I'm never going to get ranked. Or I'm not going to move up. What do you think about that pressure that those kids went through at that time?
I mean, I think there's definitely pressure. Like we're all human, and especially being kids, like you have your eyes on certain prizes, and when you don't perform or you don't do well, like it's obviously hurtful to you. But for me, like I didn't have those opportunities. One, because I just didn't play travel ball like that, and because two, I have a super, super old school dad. Like my dad is not into, well, at least at the time. And he coached high school basketball for 20 years here in Las Vegas, first Black coach to win a state championship, all that. But I remember just when I finally got on the scene and, Vegas people knew me, but, nobody else really did. Like I got recruited to go to Gorman. My dad was like, no, you're not going to Gorman. You're going to whatever school I'm at. And if they're good, they're going to find you. We're not doing any of these camps, any of these, all that kind of stuff where kids are, parents are taking their kids to all these different opportunities for them to get exposure. And my dad just wasn't into that. Like I literally had to have my best friend beg him to let me play travel ball with her. And that's kind of how I blew up. Like I went from UNLV and Pepperdine to Duke, Texas, USC, just all kinds of, power schools. And, I probably, if I didn't have that opportunity or whatever, I probably would have went to a low major program. So I think that there's a lot of pressure on the kids just because of the time that we're in, especially, social media era. You see, I think you have much more knowledge of the people that are around you and who you're competing with, as opposed to back when I played. You have the rankings, whatever, but now everybody's on social media. I can go watch Ani's highlights and know that I'm going to meet him Saturday at this camp and may the best, player win kind of thing. And I think that we didn't have that as much. So I think the pressure is at an all-time high, but I really hope that, kids understand that, this isn't really the end all be all. And there's a lot of players that are really good early that aren't good late. And there's a lot of players that are good early that, kind of see it all the way through. But it really just kind of depends on you.
Yeah. I feel like at a time where there was only when you had just one camp where you really had to perform, if you didn't get ranked, I feel like there's more pressure there than what you have now. I mean, just me looking at players. I mean, I've seen guys just take, they'll take games off in live period events where college coaches are there watching them. I see them take games off or not play hard in big. I mean, you're talking about standing room only events, and some guys are just like whatever, and they play bad. They're just like a lack of caring. I think players don't, because of the rankings and the social media, and they can post highlights and do those things. They feel that, okay, I can mess up here and it's okay. Like it's so that there's not if a guy played 10 games, how many players, Ronnie, like do you see now? Okay, if he played 10 games, he's going to bring it all 10 games.
Yeah,
we're not like there's not a lot of key players we really sustain that, and we're talking about guys from the top. There's guys at the top that we wouldn't say that about. I feel that if in a camp and like in a setting like that where, hey, I have to perform here, or my whatever stock I have or where I'm at right now is going to drop or is going to increase. I think players back then had more pressure. I think players now have pressure, but I feel that they have different avenues to
have more options.
The opportunities for sure,
right,
are way greater.
And I just seen where there's so many players now that will take games off or not play in games where it could help them, or they feel like, oh, it can hurt me more than would help me. I mean, it hurt me more than it helped me, so I'm just not going to play, because like my ankle's kind of sore or something like that. You weren't seeing that in the 80s.
No. Yeah, especially you had less opportunity to see them. You didn't know as much about them, as Chelsea said. The players knew each other back then, but they didn't have a bunch of games against each other. Mm-hmm. And it's very funny, James Blackman, who played in the 1983 McDonald's game, and I think he also was a teammate. I got to talk to him a little bit at the 2014 McDonald's All thing. Devin Booker was in that game. He was from Mississippi, and we talked about the kid who played at Duke. Justice Winslow, was that?
Yes, Justice Winslow.
Justice Winslow. His dad played in that McDonald's game. Mm-hmm. Okay, 1983. So I go, what was it like? He's all Pearl Washington. We were just scared of him. Like, we couldn't guard him. Yeah. We couldn't guard him. He was a New York guard. He was way ahead of us in terms of his mentality and his his presence and his confidence. He's like, he just killed us. Like, maybe if we saw him more, played against him more, none of us hardly knew each other in those McDonald's practices, and he was the best player in terms of like coming into college that year. So, Ani, when you look at like rankings from this year's and recent years, do you look at it like, if you were doing it and you may be ranking Texas players and other guys, like, is it how they're going to be the first day of practice in college, like their impact, or do you look at it like this guy is just projecting like NBA?
I look at more so when they step on the college campus. Mm-hmm. I don't put as much onto the NBA. Sure. There's just so much that can happen that has to happen in that situation. That really just, we can kind of project, but I'm not putting as much stock in as far as in the rankings, right? Sure. But it's how they can help that college day one, year one, year two, year three, like how it look like in a 4-year outlook. And then, you may sprinkle a little bit. Like, I think this kid could be an NBA player. I think he is someone that goes 1 to 2 years and goes to the NBA, but I don't put as much in it than just really just being able to help a college program like day one. And when they're younger, I feel like those I always ranked was freshmen, right? So I said, okay, I'll take a kid with a higher upside that hasn't been as productive. I'll put him higher in the rankings. But as the year goes on, it's like, okay, as like sophomore year, okay, you gotta have to produce a little bit more. Junior, okay, you're gonna have to really produce. As the years go up, production is going to be heavily relied upon as far as where I rank them compared to just overall upside. They're just complete upside play. I can't put them number one. I can't put them top five.
Yeah.
I just have to be wrong. Like I just be 5 years from now. I just have to look. I just have to look dumb because it just they haven't produced.
And that's what I want to get from our next guest, Paul Biancardi, the national director of ESPN basketball recruiting. He's going to come and talk, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the 222 class and some of the things he's learned because he's been on the coaching side. Clark, obviously was a full-time scout and never really got on the coaching side. So we're going to talk to somebody who's been on the coaching side of any things and get his perspective. But yeah, back to what you said, Ani, I do a lot of things based on production. I like to do a little bit more production. I think the only things that I see, and maybe Chelsea, you have an opinion. The only things that I see is that translate really from high school is rebounding always translates. If a guy rebounds, he's going to rebound still. If he goes against the ball, and a little bit of rim protection, obviously that depends on size and level. But if a guy wants to challenge guys at the rim, block shots, especially the bigger guys, they're not going to stop doing that. If a guy's a little finesse, maybe he develops in the shot, but those are only two things because I don't give a shit how much you score. Your passing lanes don't mean nothing. Scouts always tell me that guy's a great passer. I'm like, that ball gets picked off in college.
Right.
Like that gap is closed. Like the threading the needle. If you got to thread the needle, I did that because I can thread the needle. I'll throw the ball right by your ear. Well, yeah, that's cool in the playground in high school. That ball's going to get picked off in college and go for 2 points the other way. So
right, and you're going to be on the bench.
Yeah, and you're going to be on the bench, especially a guy my size. I'm going to be on the bench real quick. So it's like that doesn't translate. Scoring doesn't translate too much to me. So it's very interesting when we talked about Kevin Durant, and he was obviously number 2 in that class behind Greg Oden. Obviously, a lot of people talk about that over the years because of the NBA draft. Greg went number 1. Oh, it was the worst pick ever. I would take Greg number 1. I would still take Greg number 1. But the thing he mentioned, I go, well, what do you think, Clark? And he's all, it's really close. He's all, Kevin Durant has the work ethic. I go, what? I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe you might. Yeah, you're right. He's works hard, and we saw him at Nike camp. I remember sitting next to him, and he goes, he works real hard, Ronnie. I know I talked to some of the people he's involved with. Whether I don't know if it was Steve Smith at the time because he went to Oak Hill, then he transferred over to Montrose, and maybe it was his travel ball coach. But he goes, he works really hard. And Clark was right. I mean, he was right about Kevin Garnett on that, like that part of the work ethic. So, and like you said, Ani, a lot of guys now, the work ethic gets lost in the sauce, lost in the social media, the press clipping. So we're going to hopefully talk a little later on in the show to Ian Jackson, 224 from Cardinal Hayes, one of the best players in this 224 class. We want to give his opinion. He's a player, obviously. We want to try to get a player's opinion. So hopefully he can come on. He just got back playing at the Battle. And that's like you said, you want to see players go head to head. He had some good games this week. I think Strive for Greatness was there. Ani, did you follow that a little bit this weekend?
Yeah, I followed it a little bit. I followed it a little bit. I know I was supposed to follow it a little bit more, but I did a little bit. Dallas, we had about 3 events going on right at that deal.
Come on, tell us the truth, man. You were soaking in the dark room watching those Mavs.
Depressed. He was depressed, Ronnie.
Look, last night you couldn't call me. My phone was a do not disturb.
Yeah. And and we want to talk a little bit about that because we had Derek Lively number 1, as you said, in one of the rankings. Nick Smith, who you said earlier in the show, Ani, is your number 1. And then Dariq Whitehead, who's a wing. So when I look at the Mavericks, I'm like, they need a wing who could cover the perimeter and get back, shoot a bit. And then we're kind of mentioning rim protection. So do they need a upgraded center, as you said?
Oh, absolutely.
Most people say they need an upgraded center, obviously. Almost any center would do. There's whoever it may be. So I'm still a little lost of people say, oh, the center position is dead. You need shooting. Oh, I don't know about that. So that's very interesting as we look at this 222 class because you got Dariq Whitehead who can shoot. He's strong. you got Nick Smith, who's a dynamic guard, and then you got Derek Lively, who offers that rim protection. So, Ani, do you still think all the positions are important? Is it like, no way, like you look at the NBA draft at Jabari Smith, guard the perimeter, get back, rotate back, shoot it a bit. You got to be able to shoot, have size, length, or do you still think this game is still traditional and the big man is still great? What do you think there?
I still think big wings that can shoot and defend are your primary. I think the big man, having a real reliable big man, is like the final piece, in my opinion. But I think that having a big wing that can score it and create and switch on defense on and off, I think those are the most valuable pieces. I think that's where you really need to build your team up. But you can only go so far with that, in my opinion. You can go fairly far, but I think that centerpiece is like that last piece in that puzzle, that if you have a good centerpiece, you can win. You'll have a chance to really win a championship. I think you can get far. You may be able to get some finals runs, potentially get in the finals. But I think what really, like, when you have that big man that can really hold it down, and when you look at it, the three teams, I mean, Dallas is out, but you look at teams like Golden State, I mean, it is what it is. Kevon Looney, who's been fantastic. You look at Miami with Bam Adebayo. You look at Boston, how good are they when they have like Al Horford and Robert Williams, in front court doing what they're supposed to do. Those are three teams that, if they win a championship, they have the pieces. Like Boston has Jason Tatum, they have Jaylen Brown, they have they have those big wings, but they have the big men that really hold it down. Miami's the same way. Golden State's the same way. I think your guard, your perimeter players, they're the most valuable pieces, but that center position is still big. I think people downplay the center position because generally they're not going to be your number one guy now, right? I mean, we may have a year where you have the center as being the main piece, being the number one guy winning a championship, but it's not. It's more of an outlier thing than something that you're going to see year by year.
Gotcha. Well, let's bring in Paul Biancardi, director of ESPN National Basketball Recruiting now. Paul, can you hear us?
I can, Ron. Hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Welcome to the In the Paint Show. I'm here with my co-host Chelsea Hopkins and Ani Umana. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Hi, Chelsea. Hi, Ani. Ronnie, I got to ask you right off the bat. He's downplaying the big man, but you call him go in the paint. I mean, what's up with that?
Sometimes we go hard in the paint. Other times we go a little soft. We've been trying to go a little bit harder in the paint. But, yeah, we definitely want to go dig in with you on a few tough topics and talk player rankings. Mostly wanted to get your perspective, especially from the coaching side. You've been on the coaching side. So when did a national player rankings first cross your desk, and which ones did you follow?
Well, thinking back, it was Bob Gibbons, Clark Francis, and Tom Konchowski. Those are the three names that come to my head right away. Though I don't think Tom had player rankings. Tom had his SBI. It would be all typed out. You would get it through the mail. Just like you did get all the scouting reports back in the early 90s by mail. But I think it was Bob Gibbons and certainly Clark Francis when it came to rankings.
Sure. Yeah, and we talked to Clark a little bit earlier and just got his perspective. And we kind of wanted to get your perspective more on this current year, and then talking a little bit like your perspective from the coaching side.
Yeah, you mean this year's group of players?
Yeah, the 2022 group. That's kind of we wanted to focus a little bit about that, because there's a big brouhaha about 247 has a Nick Smith number one, and he's the first player from Arkansas to be number one since Corliss Williamson, and then you guys have a different group. You have a different player at number one in the group, and Rivals has a different player, Dariq Whitehead. So just talk a little bit about that and how you came to the conclusion of your number one player in this class, and we'll take a look at your rankings here.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what makes rankings fun, right? Everybody has their opinion on it. For me, it was Derek Lively, because if he plays his A game, which includes a three-point shot, I mean, I think his A game in the paint and his A game behind the arc could make him special at the next level. It already made him special in the high school game in terms of blocking shots, rebounding the ball, and scoring. I mean, he had nights where he had 20-plus points both inside and out. He grabbed a couple of double-figure rebound nights in terms of in the 20s. I know he had multiple 20-point rebounding games.
Sure.
And then he had close to double-figure blocks on some occasions. So when you can put all that together at 7'1", he's got unbelievable mobility for his size. One of the most mobile bigs that I've seen in quite some time. Changes direction so well, can really run the floor, and does so. So when you put all that together, for me, I think at the next step when it comes to, the NBA, I think he'll be a lottery pick, as those other guys will. I think Derek has done it at the high school level. I think he'll do it at the college level, and I think he'll be a lottery pick. Though Dariq Whitehead and Nick Smith are right there with him. You mentioned the other services had them number one.
Sure.
They were right behind Derek Lively on my board.
Gotcha.
Paul, so, how do you think the coaching side of things has helped you appreciate rankings these days?
Well, Chelsea, I got to tell you, when I first got the job, they told me I had to evaluate players, tell the country who the best players were, why they were the best players, and how they could help their respective teams. Ooh. I thought that was, what I've done my whole life as Division I assistant coach and head coach. That was the easy part. Then they said you had to rank them. I said, how hard could it be to rank these guys? So, but by putting them in an order, comparing and contrasting, it helped me be a better evaluator. Never did I think in my wildest dreams that this would become such a big to-do in grassroots basketball. It's become a huge business on so many levels, and you add NIL into it. It's even bigger right now. But the coaching perspective has helped me a lot because I just focus in on what's most important. I keep the main thing. I don't get pulled. I don't get swayed. NIL, social media following, it's somebody's son who is a great player in the NBA. None of that matters to me unless it matters on the court.
Ooh, I like that.
Paul, we asked Clark Francis this question, and want to ask you, when you first evaluate a player, what's the first things you're looking at? When you first time see a kid.
Well, when I go sit at any game, whether I'm expected to see someone I know or maybe don't know anybody in the game and just want to get a feel for who's playing, I'm looking for that energy right away. Like, who's standing out with energy? Who's sprinting back on defense? Who's sprinting the floor on offense? Who's making multiple effort plays? I kind of look for that right away because then I can assess the talent of that player after. But that energy and effort right away can get my attention. But when I break the game down for evaluation purposes, I look first at the physical measurables, the height, weight, wingspan,
size,
quickness, strength, all the things vertical that lend into itself on a physical measurable side. And then I go into the skills, the ability to score the ball from different levels, the handle, the passing. I look at defense, obviously, on the ball, off the ball, rebounding on both ends. I break it down into basketball IQ. I want to know if they understand where they're supposed to be and when they're supposed to be there. Do they get what execution really means? And then I look at the traits, both on and off court traits. Now I do a lot of behind the scenes trying to dig out the traits on the court and off the court, because I believe that the traits of a player, both on the court and off, you can protect the talent of that player and eventually enhance that player as he moves up or she moves up in levels.
Ooh. So Paul, what would you say the main difference is between a player that's in like the top 5 to 7 to the number 1 prospect? I know we just talked about this upcoming class and how you thought the 3 players at the top were really close, but what would be that thing that would separate, for your rankings, I guess, Derek Lively having that edge?
Yeah, it's a combination of things in my mind. Number 1 is if they all played their A game, where would they be? Because that's a little bit how you have to project in this business. It's a forecasting business, right?
Yeah.
You have to tell everybody what the weather is going to be tomorrow. And you may not always be right, but hopefully you'll be accurate.
Yeah.
For me, I break them down into tiers. So that top tier, that top 3, that top 4, and sometimes even that top 5, those are all guys that I look at that could be number 1 players in the class.
Okay.
And then right outside the top 4 or 5, that's the next group. I'm looking at potential. I'm looking at productivity level. I'm looking at consistency. And at times, it really becomes a subjective opinion when you start to break things down. In my mind, Nick Smith, Dariq Whitehead, and Derek Lively were all number 1 prospects in this class. And in a lot of classes, you get multiple guys that you think can be number 1. And you put somebody there for a reason. And with Lively, it was the potential down the road versus the other 2 guys. But to separate, 1, 2, 3, 4 versus 5, 6, and 7, there's some differentiating factors.
Gotcha.
Okay.
We talk about players that could be potentially number 1, and we're going to bring on another guest. Paul, you can just hang with us. We'll see if we get all 5 of us on. We're bringing on Ian Jackson from Cardinal Hayes and the New York Whiz Kids.
I just watched them this weekend.
Yeah, so hopefully he got something good. So let's bring in Ian now, and we'll go with 5. Hi, Ian. Can you hear us in the paint show?
Yeah, I can hear. How you doing?
Good.
Hi, Ian.
Appreciate you coming on, Ian. We're talking here with Paul. We're talking about just player rankings and evaluations, but more than that, we just kind of wanted to bring you on and talk about your season, and talk about your high school season. You guys won the Catholic City League title, had a big win over Stepanak. How did you feel? How did it feel to win that last meeting and reach that goal? Talk a little bit about that last game.
It was definitely big. Before that, we recently lost to Stepanak. Twice? We lost to them twice. In some big games. So in that game, coming out with a winning mentality and the team, all of us understanding that we have to do whatever it takes to win, and we all got it. We all collectively came as one as a group and got it done. It was big.
Nice.
Paul, you want to jump in there and ask him a question?
Yeah. Ian, how you doing? Paul Biancardi.
How you doing?
I saw you play this weekend in the battle in the New York, in the Apple.
Yeah.
Yeah. First question I have is, when you coming on my podcast?
Whenever you willing to have me, I come.
All right.
You got to invite him, man. You got to get him on.
Hey, Ian, one thing, and I posted this about you this weekend. I watched you a couple of times. I know you had a tough loss against the Wrens. But when you play, you go on to the next play. You don't let a bad call or even a bad play take away from your focus. How did you develop that mentality?
Just understand that you just move on. It happened already. You can't change it really. So just like understanding that you can't really change what happened already. So just moving on, and then understanding what you could do better to fix it, and then trying not to let it happen again.
Yeah, that's a great quality you have at a young age. And I look at, obviously, your athleticism, your skill, your IQ, some of your traits, talk to people that know you well. But in the middle of a game, I just love the way you just keep going to the next play. Whether you made a bad play, your teammate made a bad play, or the referee made a bad call, you have that next play mentality, and that's going to serve you well in the future.
Appreciate it.
Ian, tell him real quick before we let Paul go, why are you the best player in your class, and why are you maybe the best player in the country? Obviously, you were the sophomore player of the year. Kind of tell him why that is.
Right now, I think I feel like that I'm a great player. But I definitely know it's things that I won't call myself the best, because I still have a lot more to grow and a lot more things to understand about the game. But but I feel like I bring a lot to the game. On the defensive end, I'm there. Offensively, I can get it done, and I can play with other good players. It's like I'm not really that difficult to play with, but it's definitely still one thing I could grow up in my game. So I won't say I'm the best, but I appreciate you saying it there.
Well, okay, we appreciate it. Well, Paul, we'll let you go, Paul. Hopefully you watch the rest of the interview, and we'll get him on your podcast. I'll give you his phone number.
All right, guys, thank you for having me. And that humility that you have, Ian, that's going to make you even better in the long run. All the best to you. And Ronnie, thank you. And Chelsea.
Okay.
Bye,
Ronnie.
Paul.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon, Paul.
Bye-bye.
So, Ian, we had Paul. He was talking about evaluations and development and how he comes to his final rankings and stuff like that. But wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you reached the goal in the city, winning the city championship, Catholic League championship. But, talk a little bit about your freshman year. You didn't really have a freshman year. Just talk about what you went through there with COVID. New York was locked down. Yeah, how did you get in the gym? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it was rough. Not really having a freshman season to get like any type of experience for this year. So just coming in this year really raw, not really knowing what to expect. It was definitely like different. I had to adjust to it. But last year, we had in school we had like a little about 5-6 game tournament, whatever. We won, but I didn't really get to play that much. I was away at USA camp, but I played about 2 games. It was definitely different. The high school game for me, just going to high school game, my body wasn't really where it needs to be. So doing what I usually do wasn't as easy. So it was definitely a challenge. But I was able to stay in the gym with my AAU team. We had a gym that I was always able to go to during the COVID thing. So getting in the gym wasn't that difficult, but just knowing to keep putting in work while everything was going on, that was really key for me.
Ian, you talked about playing with other good players, and for a player like yourself, and you've been around a lot of guys, like that can be a hard thing. Talk about just what that takes, just for advice from like a younger player that looks up to you. Like, how are you able just to play with other players and even play with guys that may, think they're right there with you, that may want to compete with you a little bit. Just talk about that.
Just understanding that it's about the team. I understand like individual success is great, but like my key for me, like I've always been accustomed to winning. Like even if I have a good game, I want to win. Like if we could lose, the good game wouldn't even matter if we really lost to me. Like my main thing of everything is just winning, and then playing with other good players. You got understanding that you got to put some of your things to the side to help the team as a better. Like you all can't have just understanding that. You can't like put yourself above anyone else. Just everybody stay even as a team.
Nice. Ian, you talked a little bit about just being away at USA Basketball with the under-16 team. We know that you were able to make an impact in the 2021 FIBA America Championships. I just want you to talk a little bit about your experience going to Mexico. What was it like? Have you ever been out of the country? Was it super different for you? Just give us a little insight on that.
It was definitely a great experience. Going to Mexico was definitely different. Like even on COVID, the COVID thing made it way more difficult. We couldn't really leave the room, whatever. The food wasn't really what we were accustomed to. It was different in that way too. So just understand this like really like being able to push through all of the cons about it, like not having the greatest food, just not in the best living conditions. Really was definitely like something that that helped to mold me a little bit, and just learning from the coaching staffs there, taking everything what they have to say, not just listening, taking every little key thing and just listening to everybody, even my teammates, just taking everything. Yeah.
Wow.
Gotcha. Yeah, that must have been a great experience. Where did you guys fly into, Ian? Where did you guys go to Mexico City or
Mexico? Yeah, we're in Mexico.
Yeah. Had you ever been out of the country before?
Yeah, when I was younger, I went to Antigua, but that was about it.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. Talk a little bit about. Paul talked a little bit about the battle. You guys didn't, get the win against the Rams like you wanted, but what was the assessment of your game? What grade would you give yourself?
I could have played way better. I feel like there was a lot more things I could have done to impact that game that I didn't do. Looking back at it, even watching the game after the game, a lot more things I could have done. Like defensively, rebounding. I shot the ball. I feel like I settled too much. It was just a lot of things that I could have done more. But yeah, I just look back on it, and I'm just gonna grow from it. I'm not gonna dwell on it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Ian, talk about when you were. You said that COVID year, that freshman year, didn't really play much. When you got back in it, and then you had to play, you had some major games to play. How was that feeling like? Are you nervous like when you go into big games, or how was your nerves even at that time? After a year really not open like that.
After the year, yeah. I can say my confidence was there. It was there from the USA thing. Me making the team boosted my confidence a lot from where it was before. So just me making the team, and then that confidence coming into the season, when my teammates playing, all they trusted me, knowing that I can lead them to where we had to go. They gave actually boost of confidence. So it wasn't really about nervousness. Not really.
Your hard work paid off. In talk a little bit about Ball is Life. We named you National Sophomore of the Year. So did Max Preps. What was your first reaction when you heard that and that your hard work had paid off?
I was excited hearing that, knowing that you have Max Preps looked at me as a sophomore player of the year. Just knowing that all the work throughout the season, all the ups and all the downs is paid off. All the late nights in the gym and hard practices is paid off. So it was definitely something that I can say I was excited about. Yeah.
Nice. Ian, would you say that there's any particular player, maybe NBA player, maybe, somebody from your hometown that you've modeled your game the most after, anybody that you've kind of just look up to and just feel like, hey, I can be a guy like him, or, whenever I take my next step, whether that's, college, NBA, just somebody that you really admire playing wise?
Right now, I watch a lot of Shai Alexander right now.
Ooh.
Yeah, I watch a lot. We have like a similar frame. Just like some things to do, like, hey, get to the spots well in the mid range, and then get to the shots he want to shoot. That's something I'm looking to take from his game.
I'm a big Shai fan. So what do you feel that you talked about just improving and things that you could have done better? Like, I'm just curious to know, what do you think is the main thing that you need to focus on to improve that's going to, take you to the next level?
Right now, I feel like I can become a better leader. Playing on a 17U team, one of the youngest kids on the team, even though I'm a sophomore right now, I feel like I could lead way better. From what I've experienced, that some of my teammates haven't experienced, I can have a lot to share to them that I feel like I don't right now. But I feel like when I start doing that and start getting them on the same level mentally as me, then I feel like we could do good things.
Oh, I really like that. Okay, speaking of leadership, just my last question for you. Do you see yourself as a vocal leader, or somebody who just kind of, I'm going to lead by example, I'm going to play hard, I'm going to do my thing? Or are you a talker, a yeller? Like, what's your leadership style?
I like to talk. I like to talk to my teammates. I feel like when you say something to them, it hits a little bit different. It's like the teammates hearing it from you, like, vocally. So I like the vocal leader is what I would say.
I like that. Good.
Cool. That makes sense, Ian. One more question. We'll let you go. Just tell us what your plans are for the rest of the summer. Obviously, the summer's going pretty quick. Are you out of school yet? And what's your plans for the rest of the summer?
No, we got out of school June 9th, so I'm in school now.
Gotcha. A little more school.
Yeah.
We see you in the classroom there.
Yeah. But for the rest of the summer, my plan is to build my body a little bit more, just keep getting better, and then hopefully make the USA team again. We have camp June 18th, so hopefully make the team again, and then win another gold medal. That's really my big plans for the summer.
Gotcha.
Well, good luck to you, Ian. I'm sure you're going to do great. You have the right mentality, and you seem like you work really hard. So good luck to you.
Appreciate it, Ian. Thanks. Tell your teacher thanks for setting up the classroom real quiet. You got your own setup there, and you got and for taking the 15 minutes or so to come on with us. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All right,
take care. Bye.
All right.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, we see Ian there, got the VIP treatment.
I really like that kid. I don't know if he's just like super politically correct, but he knows everything to say. And obviously he's super talented. I mean, he's sophomore of the year and stuff like that. But wow, I mean, I'm expecting big things from him based off of the stuff that he just told me. And that was my first introduction to that kid. So good luck to him.
And I've heard a lot of really good things about that kid just off the court. I mean, just really good kid. Talented as hell.
He's talented. And they again, he had that tough year. They didn't, like he said, they just played this little mini tournament like in May, maybe middle May, and they couldn't play it in New York City, so they had to go to Long Island. It was at Archbishop Stepanak, which is his rival, and that's awesome that their coach put that on for them, and they was able to go over through the COVID hurdles. And he's lucky that he goes to a parochial Catholic school, because the city schools, the public schools didn't get anything that year in COVID. Like New York was really locked down. So he was able to at least get in the gym. And obviously he has a great attitude there. And it's pretty cool. I had Paul put him on the spot. I mean, he didn't know that. And he's like, well, I'm the best player.
And I like that he said SGA. Kids, what I noticed too, I think, sometimes we get caught up in saying like, I like Kevin Durant, or I like Bron, or I like, and people don't realize how unrealistic it is to be one of those people.
Right.
So when he said SGA, and the first thing that he said that stood out to me was just the frame and the style of play. Like, he's looking at what he sees that he can be. Like, you can love LeBron all you want to. Are you going to be 6'8" and 250? Yeah. Probably not. Like, so I really, really like some of the stuff that he said, and just that he's following somebody that, you know, he feels like he can model his game off of. And I, as a player, have done that too. Like, you know, I was always a big fan of just like Mike Conley, you know, people that maybe aren't the best players, but people that, you know, he's playing below the rim. Mike Conley's doing all kinds of floaters, and that's what I like to do. So, you know, like, it's just realistic. So I really like that he said that, because I think that's awesome. And I think that just, he has really good perspective on what he can be as a player, and he's doing all the right things. So good luck to that kid. Wow. I really enjoyed him.
Yeah. He's obviously going to go to Team USA. He got invited back to try out for that team. I believe the FIBA event is in Tijuana, Mexico. TJ,
correct.
Mexico. Yeah. I may go to a couple days. I may go to a
Yeah, that's close by, Ronnie. You should go.
Yeah. I'm just going to go. It's like after the Pangos camp, and it would be, I guess, before NBA Players Association camp. Like you said, third week of June, June 10th to 18th, whatever he said. But, you know, obviously they're going to start with 27 guys, and then they're going to cut down. And I think he's by far one of the younger guys.
Yeah.
You know,
do you think he has a good chance of making it?
I don't know. You know,
I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
Yes, no, maybe. I mean, it's probably gonna be tough.
I don't know. Maybe.
I like, he has a chance. It's gonna be tough. I mean, it's that
older group, right? Yeah. It's not the 16 group.
But the fact that he was even considered being young, you know,
like,
I mean, I think that's a testament to something.
I definitely think he'll make the first cut. After that, just, you know,
who they like.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, because again, he went up against Nas Cunningham, and they won that game, I think 83-61. Ian had like 19. I think Nas had 26 or 27. Ani, who do you like in that class too? You like Nas? You like there's Ian, there's Isaiah Iholim. Obviously, we're gonna see more of them. It's early, but like you said, if you're out there, people are out there, they're already ranking them. So, you know, what do you think about 224 so far?
I like Ian. Ian, it was actually my number one. He's like the best one that I've seen so far. Nas Cunningham's really good. Trey Johnson's kind of in there. I think he's like, you know, he's like in that top 5 area. But like Ian, just like his size, positional size, ability to score and play make. I think there's a lot of just upside. I mean, and he's young too. When I found out he was young, how young he was, I was like, yeah, he has a chance of, you know, I have him number one. I think that just from the talent and production that I've seen, and then also with the upside. I definitely had him number one.
And I'm glad you mentioned age, Ani, because truthfully, it's getting out of control here. Some of the kids are 24 playing in under 16, under 17. You can't tell. They have full beards, mustaches, all kinds of stuff. So I like that he's a true 16 and under. Like, this is good. Like, good.
Yeah, because if you look at, and we'll go by Paul's rankings because we just had him on the show, and I'll just run them down real quick. He has Nas 1, Isaiah Iholim 2, Ian 3, Trey Johnson, who you just mentioned from Dallas Lake Highlands, and Derek Queen, who's at Montverde. That's the top 5. And the reason why Ian was a player of the year for me is Gil St. Bernard's did good, but Nas didn't kill. You know, he wasn't like the best player in the state or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you go to Isaiah Iholim. He missed maybe 10 games for Sierra Canyon because of the transfer. That team was a little up and down. They had like 9 players who were D1. Sometimes Isaiah played good. Sometimes he didn't, you know. Sometimes Amari was in the lineup. Sometimes he wasn't. Sometimes Bronny stepped up. Sometimes Bronny was out. It was just a lot going on, and they didn't really play to expectations. And then you go to Trey Johnson, who's I've seen before, and he's a great prospect. And like you said, maybe he's getting there. Maybe he's on the uptick, Ani. And then Derek Queen, Montverde, hardly ever played.
Right.
And they got a senior team. They got Dylan Mitchell. They got the other guys.
Malik Renew.
It's just opportunity. So when you look at Ian, he's the best player, one of the best players in the Catholic League. And his team won the Catholic League title. He played well. He averaged like 18 points. So it was the production, which you kind of mentioned, like you like the production, and I'm on that side too. So he was deserving. And he, like you said, Chelsea, he's a great perspective. You expect a kid to come on, and he has good perspective.
Yeah, he really does.
He's got to produce and get better and continue to get better. And I think USA basketball has really helped him. again, if you miss your freshman year, and you're a good really player, it's like, dang, what am I doing? Should I go out of state? Should I move somewhere else? What's next year going to be like? He stayed with it. And I got to give a shout out to our previous guest on the In the Paint show, Patrick Bassoni, the coach at Archbishop Stepinac. He put that tournament together for the Catholic League players, at least can have some type of season. His staff, his admin at the school, they all worked to invite all the Catholic schools to their school. They hosted it every day for like 15 days. Every single day. They had teams in there. They played. New teams came in. They played. And again, it was on Long Island, and the rest of New York City was basically shut down. So I'm glad they got that opportunity. We'll see what Ian does. So Chelsea, you mentioned age. And I follow that because, again, you follow everything based on 18 years. You can always, if you evaluate players, you always know how old a player is. Just go by 18 years. Oh, he's – what class is he? Oh, he's 2003. Like, if you know LeBron's 2003, that's 19 years ago. So you just do the math on
figure it out,
7 or whatever. And again, you got these really older guys, and you had some of those guys a long time ago who were a lot younger. So would you like to see – Chelsea, maybe an event or even some rankings, an American system where like it's by age, or do you think no, it's class? You get drafted with a certain class, you get scholarship with your class, or would you like to see more age appropriate things?
I personally think age appropriate. You see all the reclassifications and stuff now, and sometimes people are late bloomers. The parents say they do the reclassification earlier because maybe their kid is underdeveloped or whatever, but you're going to have to play against these people at some point anyway. So I'm just a fan of play with your age group. And that's how we're truly going to be able to evaluate you. Some of these kids, if anything, if you're younger and you're playing up, then okay. But if you're the oldest person, playing in a group of people that are clearly younger than you, like, to me, it just becomes a strategy thing to try to have your kid be ranked the highest. But truthfully, if he was playing with the kids that he's supposed to be playing with, he wouldn't be doing that well. So to me, I would like to see more regulations on age, just because I think we put age on everything. Like, so it should be that way, in my opinion. And I think that things have gotten a little bit out of hand with the just reclassification. And, I talked about, looking the part. Like, some of these kids, you really can't tell. So, you have to, I really want the age thing to be known, because I've been to tournaments and camps and I'm like, this kid's 29. If I had to just look at him and his body is way developed than the kids that he's playing against. And I really just think that people don't know most of the time. And then a lot of times, like, these clubs and these parents get tricky with the age because they know that they can. Right. There's no definitive, they know that they can do that. So why wouldn't I reclassify my kid and have him be number 1 as opposed to making him play with the kids that he's supposed to play with, and now he's number 15? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's becoming too strategic. And at the end of the day, being ranked number 1 now doesn't mean you're going to be ranked number 1 later. So just do the appropriate age and let's just go from there.
Yeah. And I think, but what I think the reason that it doesn't really matter as much is because college coaches don't care. And I think that's where the trickle down is just the fact that college coaches, they'll say, oh, he's 19 or he's about to turn 20. Oh, hell, I mean, that means he's more mature. We ain't got to deal with and we have 4 years with him. Like, they're like, oh, he's 19 years old, 19, 20 years old. He's more mature, and I have 4 years with him. And I think that's where I think that's why at the grassroots high school level, there's not a real care for it, because at the college level, I think
that's valid. But then on the flip side, most of these kids' goal is to go to the NBA. And in the NBA, they love it when you're your true age and you're young. Oh, he's 19. Right. Oh, he's 24 and he's too old. You know what I mean? Like,
99% of them not going to the NBA.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's very true. But 99% of them think they are. And that's the problem.
That's true.
So,
they think that.
They think that. So my thing is, like, why it should just be fair all the way around. Like, there's obviously some type of advantage if you're older or more physically mature than, the kids that you're playing against. But I get that there's no, like, it doesn't really matter. But if it doesn't matter, then why don't we just put an age limit on it like we do everything else? Oh, you need to be 18 to do this. You need to be 21 to do this. Like, we have ages for age limit for everything. So
I think it's to what Ani says, but also it's the industry. So just think of an event, and the coaches had to spend more time checking kids' birth certificate or IDs. get to the parents. Can you give us your, the information? It's just another step. And they, quite frankly, are either A, they don't have the time or they're too lazy. B, they're too lazy. You know what I mean? Like that's where we are. It's a money-making industry. And there's not a lot of development in some of these events. Obviously, it's just they're rolling out the ball. So to your point, Chelsea, you guys both make good points. I think that's one other point is who's going to take the steps to do it when right now we have ref short. Yeah, nobody wants to do it. We have ref shortages. Refs are getting knocked out and beat up at events.
That's crazy.
We have a lot of problems. We've got a lot of problems. So it's like there's just another step. But I still would like to see at least one event where it's age appropriate and age regulated. It doesn't have to be the whole summer, but at least something. And that's where I think the USA basketball does a good job because you have to be a certain age limit to try out for the team.
Yeah.
And even though it's not everybody in the country, it's not open tryout, it's invite. You're obviously a better player like Jackson. It still starts giving us the basis like, okay, that kid tried out for that team. I think one of the things that I thought about that was Dalen Terry from Arizona when he tried out for that. He tried out for I think it was a 20 and under team last summer. He didn't make it. It was obviously the TCU coach, Jamie Dixon, who cut him, but he got a good at it because he was in a lot of the guys were a lot younger, meaning they were still in high school or and he'd already done a year of college. But like you said, Chelsea, he was young. And he's a lot younger than the guys that are even graduated a high school class under him. He's still younger than those guys. He's one of the younger guys in this draft group. If he stays in, even though he did 2 years of college, he's still one of the younger guys. So it's very interesting how that works. Obviously, the ages have been all over the place with these rankings over the years. The ages have been varied. And the reason I asked you about that, Chelsea, originally is as we go back to when Nike and ABCD split up, we talked about that a little bit. That famous moment when LeBron kind of came of age against Lenny Cooke. It was in Princeton. It was in the summer of 2001. And I remember, and obviously it was a big moment. It's a big moment in grassroots basketball. But what really I thought about a little bit later, especially when Lenny's documentary came out about 8 years ago, Lenny Cooke's the name of it. I'll give some reference to it a little later, is the age. You mentioned that because Lenny was class of 2002, which is 1 year above LeBron. But Lenny was really supposed to be in class of one, but he's kind of like a New York baby who kind of, the Reaganomics of it. He kind of slipped through the cracks of school. So he was reclassed and he was a pretty good player. He was a pretty good prospect. But at that time in 2001, at that ABCD camp, a lot of people don't know Lenny was 19 years old and a few months. LeBron was 16 years old and maybe like 5 months or 16 and a half. So even if Lenny would have played him, I would have said, look, he's 16.
Yes. And Lenny's 20, basically. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, Lenny's going on 20. Like he had a woman he stayed with already who was an older lady who brought him to the event.
Yeah, he's paying bills. He has a car note. Like, no, Ronnie, this is too much. This is too much. No.
And that's why I brought it up because of Lenny's, what he was going through compared to what LeBron was going through.
Yeah.
And I remember The Life was shooting, ESPN with The Life was shooting LeBron. They were going to shoot LeBron. And you guys have seen the interviews probably over the years. But a documentary crew was following Lenny completely, like everywhere, because they were making a movie and they're going to make a movie. Oh, Lenny's going to be in the league. Lenny's this, Lenny's that. And like, I remember some people in the audience were like, yo, who you guys following? And they're like, you should be following that dude. Yeah. Like, you guys are following the wrong dude. I mean, it's a famous video clip in grassroots basketball, but even if Lenny outplayed him, and obviously, like I said, LeBron had 24 points and Lenny had 9. It was a big moment. Lenny just didn't really play too well. He kind of shrunk in the moment. But like, even if Lenny would have played really good,
it wouldn't have mattered.
It would have been like, yo, he's 19.
Yeah.
Really, people weren't talking about that. Ani, have you seen those clips of like when Lenny goes through the legs and hits that shot and is talking shit?
Yes.
And LeBron kind of outplays him, blocks his shot at the end and walks off.
Yeah, I had to go back. There's some stuff on YouTube. There's some stuff where I did see that, and it's just funny. It was like, man, they really thought he was the next one. And he thought he was like he already made it.
Oh,
I mean, he's like, I'm here. Like I am that.
I've arrived.
Yeah. So it was very interesting, just kind of looking at that, and I wish something where we can always show younger guys, or guys now, like, The
LeBron was actually the more mature guy.
100%. Very
He was a more mature person and kind of understood the moment. And Lenny was like, yeah, I'm going to the league. And he didn't play that year. He didn't play 01-02 season. He was too old. He didn't play at his prep school. And he was kind of banking on those summer moments and ABCD camp and other things. Since he played pretty good the year before. He played really good. He's one of the better players of the week, but he didn't really play that good next. So, again, that age thing is always going to be there, and obviously that's a big moment. So, Ani, going back to when you were younger, obviously we talked to Clark, and it was like newsletters. Paul said he got Clark's and Bob Gibbons' rankings, kind of like in the mail, magazines come. And then we got to like scouting reports became like on the internet. We had websites, and that's kind of where Lenny, Cooke, and LeBron kind of arrived in that. And the national interest peaked, I guess, in 2001. We mentioned because that draft was full of high school players. It was Kwame Brown, number 1. Tyson Chandler was number 2. Eddie Curry, did he go 3 or 4? Eddie Curry went 3 or 4. They were at the top. And so it was like a lot of media attention, a lot of talk about the high school and the high school players, more than even college. I remember that time vividly. Like, nobody was talking about the average college player. It was like, did you guys see those high school players? Did you watch Eddie Curry's show? Eddie Curry and Sean Dockery had a show in Chicago that they filmed. It was really cool. It was kind of something groundbreaking. Like, you could see Eddie in his house, and like they had a lot of attention. So, do you think, Ani, looking at it, the scouting is much better from that time? What do you think has changed for the better? Maybe something's changed for the worse. What do you kind of think of that?
Man, that's a great question. I think it's changed. I don't know if it's for the better or worse, but it's definitely changed. Even from when I first started about 7 years ago, it's definitely changed. You have more reports and everything's more open, or more is available. You have more ranking services. I think what stays the same is still like you always have like ESPN Rivals 24/7. Those are your on threes kind of come along, but you still have your traditional, the ones that kind of been around for a bit, being your main guys. But I think you have more. You just have more evaluators, scouts, ranking services, which, to me, parents and players don't know where to like what's really going on. You see what I'm saying? Like, someone can put out a ranking today. Here's my top 50, nationally ranked kids, and that guy, he just come out the blue. He just started a Twitter account, posts out there, and then everyone's talking. You know what I mean? Like, you see that more. Where compared, it was like, okay, ESPN put out the rankings, boom, like that's the talk. And then we still have that, but like, I mean, I can post my top 50, and I know I've have some body of work, but like, I'm not ESPN 24/7. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but I think anybody can kind of do that now. So now that I'm talking it through now, I think it's kind of a little bit for the worse.
How are you thinking about it? Well, because anybody can has a platform to put it out there.
To post something, right?
Yeah. Kind of like Paul said, all he did was look at Gibbons and look at Clark's. That wasn't Van was out there too, but like Gibbons and Clark's are well put together, meaning they get distributed. You can go back and look at them. You can go back and look at them. Now I put up some of the ones here on this pod. If you when you watch it, if you guys are listening, go look at the YouTube version. You could look at some of the stuff the video and photos we put on of some of the rankings. So it's out there, like you said, and you can put out a ranking, but it's more for social media chatter and to make some kind of a quick reaction to it,
right. And I would say now, like as an evaluator, some younger guys I do mentor, and some guys I talk to, I'll be like, hey, what do you think about this kid? And like I have one, so he made 2 threes. I'm like, hell, my mom can tell me that, like, what I mean? Like, but I remember just coming up, even though that was 7 years ago. I remember with Alan Branch, like, I mean, Like I tell people, he put me through the ringer. Like, like it was rough. Like for me to really just say, like I was evaluated, like Branch put me through some shit. Like, and now I just, I do wish, and I know kind of go off on a little bit. I want to see that a little bit more from some of these young guys that just kind of put stuff out. It's like, and that's why I try to help as many young ones as I can. Just like, like, you can't just put some stuff out there and think like you on the level of Paul Biancardi and Clark Francis and those guys. Like, those guys been doing it for years. They've done it longer than since we've been alive, But I think that it makes it a little diluted. And I think it messes up parents and players, like view on what this really is about.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's good perspective coming from you. Cause like you said, you're aging. So you're seeing what you saw when you're younger and what people are asking you about, or even younger guys. And for me too, like for me, Clark is somebody for me to talk to, because if I want to say, yeah, Clark, remember that guy? Yeah, in 1993, he's one of the few people I could just ask off the cuff. Right. I could talk to somebody, he won't even know what the hell I'm talking about. Like I don't have many guys I can just be, you remember that camp? Yeah, 2001, right? Yeah, he sucked. Clark's just going to tell the truth, like whether. And it's very interesting. You could even tell on this pod when they're talking how they're different styles. Like Paul said, he knows, like, wow, I'm a coach. I never knew the rankings were going to be this important to a lot of people that follow his rankings. Obviously, he's on ESPN and they're all over. They're widely distributed. So it even kind of shows and that's just his personality too, but it shows he's a little bit more guarded in what he's going to say and what he's going to tell somebody than Clark. Clark just, he don't care. He's just honest. Because he's coming from a different perspective. He obviously had his stuff on the internet. It's at hoopscooponline.com. You can go check out the rankings. He has rankings. You can see them easily, all the rankings through the years. And, go check them out. I help him with it. I help him keep it going in 222 and beyond. But I like to keep it going because of the history it has. And you can go back and look and see where the players are ranked. Like he mentioned, Jason Kidd was the best player in that class, no doubt. And that's kind of how this spawned, because of the Nick Smith situation in Arkansas. And that's got to be great for the fans of Arkansas. Like, not to, even if you like Derek Lively, if you like Dariq Whitehead, the fact that he's number one by somebody that's credible, it's like, it's big news in Arkansas. That's pretty cool and awesome, because usually the players from Chicago, New York, that type of thing. So that is really cool. So wanted to also give some reference points to some of the things we've talked about on this pod. We really thank our guests, and we really thank you guys sticking with us. Some of the reference points for these rankings we talked about, go watch Lenny Cooke's documentary. It came out in 2013. It's called Lenny Cooke. It's very good. It came out on Showtime. Shows all the highlights we're talking about him going up against LeBron, him playing that 5-star, and him just being very candid. I don't know if you guys saw Lenny Cooke's documentary.
I haven't seen it.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It came out in 2013. Clark talked about Benji Wilson. Benji's the name of the 30 for 30 on ESPN. That's a very good one because he gets some perspective from Sonny Vaccaro. I guess he came to like a civil case after Ben got shot and killed in the summer of 1984, right before the school season was about to start in November of 84. He got killed. It was a big tragedy, big news at that time, but he became a character witness for what Benji was going to make, like monetarily, if he was going to make the NBA. And Sonny said, yes, he played at this camp. He played at ABCD. He did really well. He really was going to be a top pick. So it kind of brought that to the forefront of like these high school players, how big they were back then, because Sonny was trying to help the family to prove that this guy lost a lot of value when, that his family lost a lot of value, even though he was still a high school player. So that's a great story. Watch Benji, the 30 for 30. Obviously, Sonny's Soul Man talks a lot about what we talked about, his split from Nike, him signing Kobe Bryant to Adidas, how big that was and how that ramped up the Adidas versus Nike war basically in the summer. And obviously, Sonny had the relationships and signed Kobe Bryant, who eventually ironically left for Nike. But watch that, Soul Man. Another good one is gunning for the number one spot. It's talking about the top high school players, the Elite 24, Boost Mobile Elite 24, which I had the pleasure of helping and being involved with when I was at ESPN, picking the players. But it's a good documentary. just kind of talks about rankings, talks about players going for the top spot. It features Michael Beasley, Brandon Jennings, Kevin Love. Very good documentary, gunning for the number one spot. Obviously, the most probably famous documentary, we talked about it briefly, Hoop Dreams, came out in 1994. Talks about the Nike camp and the pressure of the players, Arthur Agee and Will Gates. Ani, what do you think about Hoop Dreams? Obviously, it's one of the most well put together documentaries. It's very long. It's old now, but what did you think about it when you watched it?
Hoop Dreams was which one?
I don't know if you say this, with following the kids in Chicago from the time they're little until the time they went to college.
Yeah. No, I remember I watched that during COVID. I didn't watch all, but no, I thought
it's long. Yeah,
it's long, but just kind of following and then just tracking kind of when they start getting that attention.
Yeah,
how they took that in and just kind of how they responded, kind of how their directions, like collegiately, professional, like, you know, how it all just kind of went. It was very interesting because they really started when they were young. And just like their families and how their family dynamic changed as they got older. Like that was
it was raw and unfiltered.
Like it was like, because I think Branch was the one that told me about that. I didn't know about it. So like, I didn't finish it, but I remember watching that and I was like, yo, they actually really followed them all the way from, and then
hours and hours of footage. They did it. I mean, they did a good. Chelsea, you kind of remember that doc? Did you watch Hoop Dreams?
I've seen pieces of it, and not recently. But I need to refresh myself. I just remember the Benji doc. I did see Soul Man a little bit. You know, those are the 30 for 30s are obviously way more recent. So 1994, I was 4 at the time. You know, so I have seen pieces of it, but I'm not gonna lie and act like I've
Hoop Dreams. You guys should watch
it all
Hoop
the way
Dreams.
through. But I will watch it.
The critically acclaimed doc. It really is one of the 2 or 3 best basketball docs out there. I mean, it shows them like the family getting their electricity turned off.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't stop. The guys just filmed. It's like they're not even there no more. They got, you know how you get used to the film crew and they're not even there no more. You know what I mean? Like that's how it was very good. And then the Dominican Dream 30 for 30 is good. Talks about Felipe Lopez, who we didn't really talk about too much in this doc, but that's a good one to talk if you want to talk about player rankings and when you should leave to go pro and how he became the number 1 player in his class, which is 1994. That's called the Dominican Dream. Very good 30 for 30. And obviously some of our old episodes, we talked about this stuff. Go back and listen to episode 92. Paul's on that, talking about the rankings, development, ranking players during the COVID time. Again, that's episode 94. We're on episode 131. He talks a little bit about the rankings in that one, referencing a couple other ones that we had. Harrison Barnes, the NBA player, and Stanley Johnson, talking about them being 2 of the better players of the 2010s. They came on the In the Paint show, just talking about their upbringing. I remember Harrison was mentioning he wasn't one of the top players in his class at the beginning, and he kind of developed into that. And he went to North Carolina as the number 1 player. And then obviously Sonny Vaccaro came on the doc. Unfortunately, we had him on when Kobe Bryant died, episode 54. This was maybe a few weeks after Kobe passed away, and he talked about Kobe going to the ABCD camp, going the first year, and him telling Sonny, hey, Sonny, I'm going to come back next year and I'm going to do a lot better. Kind of like Ian Jackson did. He's like, Sonny, I didn't play to my level that I wanted to, and I want to come back next year and I'm going to be the best player in this camp. And he was. So Sonny talked about that, talked about recruiting him to the camp and recruiting him to Adidas as an to endorse Adidas products. And he didn't really know about him much going into the first camp. It was a recommendation from Gary Charles, but also because the connection was that Jelly Bean Bryant had played in his All-Star game when Jelly Bean was a high school player. So that was the connection, because he didn't really know much about Kobe's. But that's a very good In the Paint pod. And again, that's episode 54. Harrison Barnes is 43 and Paul Biancardi's 92. So we've been on for a while. We can go a lot longer, but we got to wrap up. Chelsea, what did you kind of learn? What did you take from this? I know a lot doesn't go to the women's side, but what did you gather from that? And then, in retrospect, how did you got a scholarship to Duke. How did that become, and how did that play into the rankings?
Well, what I've learned just from this is just a total business, you know, and it's all I really like, just talking about how it's opinion based. You know, these guys are doing the best that they can, just evaluating what they see at the time. But you know, we heard from both Paul that just it's really up to you, like what you're going to be as a player. And I think I was fortunate enough to grow up with a dad that kind of instilled that in me. You know, just talking about previously about not being ranked, and he didn't care that I wasn't ranked. It's not like he was gonna drive me up the streets and play at a tournament so I could become ranked. He really didn't care. So, you know, that's really not a determining factor in what you're going to be as a player. So I hope that if there was any kids that just listen to Ian, you know, very level-headed, very much aware that, you know, him being good now, you know, he has so much work to do to improve to be good later. And I think kind of my story is just a little testament to that as well. Just played 1 year of travel ball, went from a small Vegas, you know, local kid to kind of blowing up on the scene after playing one time. And then after that, it's kind of it's up to you to just kind of carve out, you know, your pathway and your niche. And there's going to just be a lot of ups and downs along the way. And you kind of are going to decide what player you ultimately are going to be. You know, I went to a top school in Duke. I had a lot of injuries, had to leave there, got recruited on top of, you know, went to a mid-major, didn't know if I wanted to play anymore, but, you know, ended up turning it up there, newcomer of the year, player of the year. And then now I'm about to go into my 10th season as a pro. So, you know, it's about the journey. And I like that, you know, people do take the time to rank and evaluate, because I do think that, you know, it's necessary for kids to just kind of see where they are, but also to give them a little bit of perspective about, you know, they can look at the rankings from years in the past and see that just because this person was here doesn't mean that they finished there. You know, so I like that it kind of gives a real world scope. So, you know, I really enjoyed our guest that we had today, and you know, it just makes me think about just kind of my story and my journey, and just how kids like Ian can, you know, figure out their own path and carve their way out in the game as well. So that's it.
Gotcha. What do you think, Ani? You know, obviously you talked about Branch, and, you know, Branch jumped on my ass one time about 2 years ago. I don't know if you remember. Because I was doing the stats, and I was like, that's an assist. Okay, number 7, assist. Number 9, assist. He's like, Ronnie, how about the turnovers? You know, like, he just, you know, I was just like, well, you know, we were just good, you know. But again, he's trying to prove a point to a younger guy that, you know, what he's been through and his perspective. So.
Oh yeah, no, I thought this was really good. Just kind of it's like going down the history with them, like Clark Francis talked about the 1979 class with Ralph, Isaiah Thomas, all those guys, and talking about KG and just his perspective on them when they were younger. All right, and then it was very interesting. Like he talked about ranking 6th grade, right? Like when something we're like, but I understood where he was coming from with it. And he said, and like Chelsea said, he said, like, I'm not the parent. You know, like, you know, it was just different perspectives on like just player evaluations, and just like talking about, like, you know, how players developed, and like Paul Biancardi talked about energy first before he even evaluates like the, you know, the physical profile, right, and just the athleticism, size, and all that stuff. It was just very interesting. Like I felt like it's kind of like I did a lot of. I like to listen. I like to listen to those things. You know,
you know, Paul can express himself pretty well. He obviously does games on air, so he knows how to say what he wants to project. And that's another thing about scouting. Some guys do a really good job, and they're not good writers, right? And then other guys are better on camera. Some guys are not good on camera, you know, and then other guys can write what they put down on paper. Like, I'm not good at describing a person's shot form and his release, like kind of describing his, what do you call it when you move? Is that kinesiology? Like his body mechanics? I'm good at that. Like, some guys are really good. They're like, his form is, you know, on target. I'm like, how did you come up with that thought so quickly? Like, I'm not good at
Ronnie's like, he's stiff.
That's all right. I'm not good at describing
the
that.
person I'm thinking about is Joe Francisco. Like, he just does a really good job of explaining what he saw to put it on paper. I'm more good at explaining what I've seen in the past, what I'm going to see, and what I'm going to see, and say who he might have remind me of, or a situation that I saw that reminded me of this current one. But yeah, some guys are very different. So like you said, it's somebody's evaluation. It's not the end all be all, but it is very important. And you know, one day when we do our NIL episode, we'll talk about the player rankings, because really we can go for another 20, 30 minutes to talk about that. But we're gonna end here now. So we appreciate everybody tuning in to another episode 131. I thought this is one of our better ones and one of our most important ones. You know, player rankings past, present, and future. So thanks for listening. Don't forget to shop at ballislife.com. That is shop.ballislife.com. 15% off your order. If you use the In the Paint Show discount code, that's PAINT15. Thanks for everybody for listening in or watching on YouTube. Thanks to all our other podcasters on the Balls Life Network. But for now, me, Ani, and Chelsea are logging off.
Bye, guys.